Welcome to Recruiting is No Joke. I am your host, Joe Lalgee, the realist recruiter. It is great to be here with you guys. As always, we are nearing episode 100 of the show. This might actually be episode 100. I should maybe do one of those posts where I'm like holding up a sign. You know how people do that for like 100,000 followers? Maybe I need to do that. But I'm not going to do that because it's not really my style. But it's great to be here with you guys. If you are a regular follower of the show, welcome back. If you're newly listening, this is going to be a great show today. We've got another amazing guest, another talent leader, and we're going to talk about everything from fake AI applications to maybe even we'll touch about Workday getting sued because I think that's interesting. Erin, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you give us what do they call it? The Twitter bio, a short little bio. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you do it for?
I'm Erin Turnmeyer. I am the VP of People Operations for Civis Analytics, which is a data analytics firm. And I do all things people. So everything from HR to recruiting to your benefits and payroll. I'm a one-person shop now.
Yeah, so you're wearing multiple hats, and hopefully you're making multiple paychecks. We're gonna
That's the new argument. I'll go to my boss with that one.
Hey, look, it's 2025. Everybody's doing nowadays 10 jobs, right? And if you're not, you'll probably be doing 19 million jobs with a bunch of AI agents.
It's
That's the
all
picture they're
fractional,
painting.
so it's multiple fractional jobs put together.
Multiple, multiple fractional jobs. Well, it's great to have you here. How long have you been in recruitment? Kind of walk us through that journey. Like, what's that look like? Love to kind of hear, a little bit of your story.
So I initially came to recruitment when I started working in talent management, which was my first foray into the HR world. That was around 2016, and I was working in the federal government for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It's a big acronym for the National Counterterrorism Center because I needed the longest title ever. And so I would go out and recruit college grads to join the intelligence community. And that was
Wow.
pretty fun though, because everyone thinks that, the spies are coming to recruit people to be spies. And it was mostly just trying to tell nerds that it's okay to be a nerd. We needed paper writers and people like that. And this is very scripted recruiting. Think conferences, big lecture halls, and schools.
Yeah, boots on the ground recruiting, which I think it's going back to that, by the way. I feel like
And
we're
we
gonna
were
get
all
back
about
to
our
that.
mailing list because we would only have job opportunities open once a year or twice a year for 2 weeks. And
Wow.
so it was like, get on our mailing list and we'll send it to you the day that it opens. We really wanted certain groups to apply. And I did that for a few years. And then when I started at Civis, I had several recruiters working on my team as we were in the fun years of 2021, 2022, and growing the company. The past couple of years, we've had to downsize, and since January, I've been a recruiter again. So here I am by myself. I've been helping throughout the last 5 years whenever someone needed help jumping on a role, but I really trusted the team to do most of the recruiting. I watched it from afar, but now I'm living it every day.
Right before kind of going online here, we're talking about some of the challenges you're seeing with number of applications coming in, a lot of fake applications. Walk us through maybe some of the differences from like when you were doing like recruitment, obviously now leading the team and doing some hands-on recruiting again. Like what are some of the things you're seeing today that maybe you hadn't seen in the past?
Yeah, there's sort of like two things. Some things are still the same. So we have a marketing role that is largely the same. The same amount of people will apply. We'll get a couple of hundred maybe over several weeks, but a very manageable group. So for those type of roles, totally normal. When we talk about tech roles and tech recruiting, though, I remember in 2021, 2022, couldn't get anyone to apply. We had to source constantly. We hired a sourcer for 6 months to come in and help us build out our DevOps team. We just had to go find candidates.
Yep.
Now that same role is posted. I wrote a post about it. It's 15 hours, 990 applicants. We had to take it
Crazy.
down because that's just not doable at that scope. And then when you look at it, because I'm a nerd and want to know what's going on, and we're going through and trying to figure out like who to interview from that, the amount of fraudulent candidates is what I'll call them is insane. So if it's okay for me to get a little bit nerdy, I think there's like 4 groups of actors in there. I don't really have the skills and I'm using AI, and please hire me. There
And
is
so do you think those are people who are, like, literally, like, copy and pasting the job description in a ChatGPT or whatever tool they're using?
very
Create
quick.
me a resume from it.
Yep. And sometimes making up organizations, and you can tell. So
Perfect.
if we take the job description, put it in, and say, "Create a resume," and you can tell, or answer our questions on our job applications
Yeah,
using this job description, and it'll tell, and then we can see those exact copy pastes. And but some of it's also I went to a boot camp, but I don't wanna admit it, so that I have some skills,
sure.
but I wanna make it sound like I've had bigger jobs than I've had. The second one is I have skills, but I don't live in the US, and I would really like the US salary. I worked for a contractor or an outsourcing firm, and you can I'm getting really good at seeing those now too, but and I say that I live in the US. I have a voice over IP number. All of the companies on the resume use background checks that are automatic, and there's the largest 2 background check companies do a yes, no, and you can look them up. They'll just say not enough information when you get the background check back. So once you find the list of those companies that you can do a little bit of cross-referencing, then there's a lot of people that require sponsorship. I work for a tiny company that I'm an HR of 1, cannot do sponsorship at this time. We'll reject them, they'll reapply. And then our system saying that they don't require sponsorship. That's a huge batch. And then honestly, there's some bad actors with completely false resumes that we don't really understand what the motivation is, but it could be the whole North Korea, China, we want to come in and steal your IP. It's hard to really know if those people are in that group of the first 3 or their own separate sect,
Yeah,
but they're the ones that caught 2 of them that are using the face recognition software,
this is
trying to look
crazy.
different, trying to be a completely different person, and that's the stuff that's super scary.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing about that a lot more, or I've been hearing about that a lot more at a lot of the conferences I've been going to. The first couple times I heard it, I was like, "This is a thing," and I've just been hearing it more and more and more. But then you also have a percentage of people who are qualified, right? And people who are good.
Yeah,
So, like, what does that kind of break down? Let's say you get 1,000 applicants. How many of those applicants are you seeing that are actually people that are qualified for
being
the position?
generous in that last pool that we had out of the 990, generous, because
Okay.
we could be wrong about some of our assumptions, would be 50 people.
50 people, right. So which is still, I mean, you compare that to 2020 or 2020, it's not 2020, 2021, 2022 during the Great Resignation. I mean, we would have killed for 50 qualified people. I think what's interesting is a lot of those applications are just taking time away. Looking at these 50 people who were qualified, it's taking time and energy away from focusing on those people. But still, if you're one of 50, it's still pretty
It still
competitive there.
grows.
Yeah, it's still a super competitive market. Let me ask you this. In terms of like what we even talk about with being qualified, like what are some of the things you look for qualifications? What are some of the things your hiring managers are looking for as well? Because I think sometimes people get confused as who is actually qualified for a job. How would you explain that to someone?
Oh, well, we actually and maybe we oversimplify it. So we are for example, I can talk about the DevOps engineer we're hiring for. We require Python or Bash and experience working with Amazon or Google Cloud. And so we have like a list of things, but you could use multiple different softwares for it. But those are the 2 main qualifications
Yeah,
because we're hiring for a DevOps 1, entry level. So, have you used those? Are you fluent in one of those 2, which is a fair qualification for that job? My only part of, like, in the recruiter screen is, like, is this person not a fraudulent candidate before I pass them on? And when I pass them on to the hiring manager, they're doing a live debugging exercise. And the reason they do it live is 1, we can't trust the tests anymore. You can't send somebody even like a 20-minute test because who knows if they're doing it
it's
themselves
like
or not.
I feel like it's like high school all over.
Right? And they are watching, and I tell them, and they repeat the instructions that we're not looking for someone to solve it or be 100% perfect, but they're looking, are they asking the right questions when they need help? Where do they look up their help? Like, what is their frame of mind? And what questions, how would they operate on a team? On this last round, I interviewed 11 people, only sent 3 forward.
Yeah.
And one of the people was using AI in the test, like clearly as they were doing it, copy
Yeah, are you
pasting.
seeing more and more and more people doing that
Yeah.
now?
Sorry, I am a numbers person, but of the 11 people I interviewed, 3 used it live that I could tell, and that's because you could see their eyes. Like, I think people think they're better readers than they are.
Well, at least if you're gonna do that, get the software where you can keep the eye contact.
I mean, but
I mean,
people have a reading voice. They do. So that's what
um,
with this candidate, they said, "We didn't see the eyes, they just entered reading voice and then would enter out like, exit it, and then start their reading voice again anytime there was a hard question."
there's a company called Final Round AI. I'll name him. I'll name and shame him. They've reached out to me a bunch of times about supporting their tool because I sometimes get behind the AI job tools. Although I just stopped working with an auto apply tool recently because as much as I thought, yeah, this could be a great tool for candidates to save time on applications. Obviously, people are just going to use it to get as many applications out and spam people, right? Which doesn't help anyone. So this company, it's a similar thing. Like I think having a co-pilot during the interview, if you suffer from like severe anxiety or you get flustered, like I could totally see like that would be a helpful thing to have because I've interviewed people before where they're like super nervous and or they go to a hiring manager and they get nervous and they
1000.
don't interview well and you're like, oh, they're a great candidate. But the problem is with a lot of these tools, they're just using them and abusing them in the wrong way, right? So then it just becomes like, hey, the AI is answering it, you're not answering it. The AI is a subject matter expert, you're not. It's the same with
Or in our
the
exercise,
application.
you could pass by saying, "I would ask ChatGPT about this question in my code.
So
1 second, let me go there, and I'll come back." And that would
yeah.
have been 1000% fine. Like, no red flags. It's the, "You can't answer a question?" Like, this isn't a technical question. I think that's one of the things people are using it for things they shouldn't be using it for. I am not a DevOps engineer, so if you are using it in an interview with me.
Yeah. It's kind of pointless. You're working at a company where a lot of people are using tech and AI. What do you think, candidates, people who are working in the tech space, what do they need to know about how you guys are thinking about AI? And I guess what would be your advice to people on what they even need to focus on when it comes to AI right now?
So there's 2 things in that question, like, focusing on AI and then as candidates. I think as candidates, at least from my perspective in the recruiting space, please God be a human being. Stop using ChatGPT.
Mm,
It's used so much to perfect this non I don't have the magical ATS that exists in some people's minds. I'm looking for a human being. So at this point, using ChatGPT and having a perfect resume hurts you. And maybe we'll go back to center, but as a candidate, the more human you are, the better. But I say all of that. We are focusing on using AI. I am constantly trying to use AI in my job to make it so that I wear many hats. I'm a team of one so that I can operate. We live on the Google Workspace. I use Notebook LM. It's my favorite tool ever to put information in and search against my own information. I love using ChatGPT or once again use Google Gemini a lot to just not spend an hour staring at the perfect wording for an email, just that easy stuff. And then I'm constantly trying to see what out there is new and am very interested in automating processes. Right now, it still feels like too app heavy, but what can we automate about the job so that I'm not spending my time like moving files or making calendar invites? Anything in that space is really
scheduling.
interesting.
The
Scheduling, as we talked about before, I hate it.
I
So if
know.
AI could just magically make that work, that'd be great. So I think people need to figure out I think people are afraid of losing their jobs because of AI. I understand that, but
Really?
I think it's the wrong way to look at it. In the tech space, I do.
Oh, okay. Meaning like literally, hey, we're gonna do a reorg now with a
Yeah,
versus, hey, I was using AI and now I lost my job.
and I think that being afraid of AI is the worst thing you could do because the more that we can get rid of this low-lying, like, nonsense repetitive tasking, whether or not you're a software engineer or an HR, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
The more your brain can have time, as long as you're using that new time, for higher level strategic thought, you
yeah.
have more job security, not less, because you're able to actually do more value added work. And I think that if people can keep like experimenting with AI with the focus on creating that space for strategic thought, it could be like really exciting time in the next few years.
I think what's interesting is, and I've been thinking about this more and more because there's a lot more news coming out around. I think Microsoft, Amazon, Duolingo, there's a couple other companies in there. They've kind of made these announcements, right? We're seeing these flurry of announcements coming in hey, we're laying off, we're restructuring, and it's like now it's in the name of AI, which it's funny because a lot of the hype over the last year has been like, you're not going to lose your job to AI, but someone using AI will. But I think one of the things I realized is a lot of these companies are so huge that there are people who are maybe not doing that much. And it might be a big self awareness part where you just have to look at your own job and go, okay, is it clear the impact I'm making? Right. And obviously, think of looking at somebody who's in the trades, for example. Obviously, it's a physical job, so it's a little bit harder to replace. But like you can say, hey, this person has fixed 10 AC units, residential AC units this week. That's some physical impact. Great. We know what they did. In corporate, it's like, "Hey, in 3 weeks, what have I done? Alright, I've attended 100 meetings. What have I actually done?" And I think this is what is kind of collapsing, and it's actually something that's kinda long overdue because a lot of these companies have acquired, they've merged, they've become these huge infrastructures, and there's a lot of people, a lot of headcount, but I'm not always sure, like, what people are doing, and it becomes apparent to me when I talk to candidates sometimes. I go, "What would you say your biggest accomplishment is this year?" And I don't even know. How are you
Not a trick
measuring
question. We're trying to help you brag. Like, yeah.
exactly, how are you measuring whether or not you're doing your job right? Like, how are you measuring performance? I don't know. And I realized that a lot of large companies, there's a lot of job titles, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of activity, but not necessarily a lot being done. And I think we're starting to see that unfold. So to your point, it's really looking at, hey, what are the things that I'm doing? How can I make them more efficient? And I think if you look at your job on a daily basis or monthly basis, or yearly basis, and you're going, hey, I'm not actually accomplishing that much. I'm not saying you should be afraid or worried necessarily, but you need to be thinking, okay, do I need to get my resume going? Do I need to start networking? Do I need to start preparing that maybe something will happen, especially if
Or
you're
look
a
for like
large
an
company?
opportunity. And maybe I'm a little Pollyannish in this, and I've had a very cool career because someone says I need help and you say, "Oh, I have time to help you." And I'll learn
Mm,
something new that way, right? Like,
mm,
or I'll go learn some AI. I'm thinking about like the HR people who are straight out of college, they are spending most of their time on forms and paperwork.
yeah,
Those jobs are what's going to go away.
yeah,
And but what if most of their time was instead spent on employee engagement or talent management? Then companies that are
exactly.
small that might only have 1 or 2 HR people or 3 or 4 can have the functions that only big companies have because AI has taken up the paperwork part. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean that those jobs have to go away. It means that now it can matter more. You can focus on the people element, not the what is your benefit form checked correctly.
yeah,
That's better. If I'm 21, I would much prefer that job than if
yeah.
you onboard people correctly with the right forms. Ugh.
Again, I don't want to use worry because I don't want to create anxiety, but the people who I think have to be the most concerned around and like really paying attention are people who you're describing where I've done 20 years of process and I'm doing the same thing over and over. All right, writing's on the wall. Technology's going to replace it. Same with recruitment, right? There are a lot of tools right now that can do screening, they can do sourcing, research, reaching out to people. There's a lot of tools that can do that, but I don't know too many tools that can talk to a hiring manager and figure out whether or not they actually need to make a hire on the team. I don't know how many can have a conversation with an executive and say, all right, let's talk about workforce planning next year. But that's the fun stuff. Those are the strategic directions. That's the consulting, and that's how we free up and get a seat at the leadership table by being able to be more strategic versus, yeah, all you're doing is posting a job and screening screening people, which is what it can become a lot of the time. Obviously, you made the transition from government into private sector, right? You're in the private sector now. A lot of people who are probably trying to do the same thing right now. What are some of the things that you would advise people? What are the things that you want people to know when they're making that transition? What do they need to pay attention to, and what do they need to be thinking about?
Oh my gosh, I have all the opinions.
It's good. I like
1,
opinions.
I decided to go to the private space 7 years before I did. So I was very strategic
Yeah.
about my exit, and I don't think that
What made you make that change, by the way?
I had children, and I
Okay.
didn't wanna raise my children in DC. I lived there on accident, and on top of that, I was promoted and got a lot of really cool jobs in government, and I didn't see space for me to get to do more. I stood up offices and got to build things from scratch, and most people that work in government never get that opportunity once in their career, and I
So
had
it sounds like
several
you
of them.
kinda were working in, like, a startup almost then, startup
Yeah,
environment.
I was known as someone who would build from scratch, and I did that for most of my career, but you can't do that forever. So those 2 things collide, and I wanted to get a different challenge. So I think that one, like, I feel bad giving people advice a little bit because a lot of people woke up and this was not their new reality.
Yeah.
A few things is I think the hardest challenge is being able to articulate your experience in a way that translates to the private sector. It really does, and the private sector will be very lucky to hire many of these thousands of people, but it is the responsibility of the candidate to translate it, and a lot of them can't yet. So talk to anybody that you know that's in the private sector and try to tell your story and have them help you write it and rewrite it and rehelp. Like most people I know that are in my position that have been out for several years from the federal government want to help anybody they can because we know how hard it is. So say yes when someone offers help. You go, okay. And I think that's hard. They've been kicked down for the past few months. So they don't, a lot of people find it hard to accept help. So figuring out what your story is and figuring out what you want. And I think for a lot of people, they're very scared and they just want a job. The problem is their resume isn't towards anything. A really great part of a large part of the government, you can switch jobs all the time. That's normal. A lot of career growth is not linear. It's like this like weird zipper, which is super fun
Mhm.
and awesome. And people become sort of more well-rounded over time. But that doesn't translate once again to the private sector. So you have to figure out how to translate that and tell that story and figure out which of those you want now. Because now you're part of the problem is a lot of people that I know at least are late 30s to early 50s, and they're not going to go into an entry level job. So they have to articulate what their specialty is when they're all very well rounded people.
And most businesses, they don't want generalists, it's like they want specialists. They want you to be good at one particular area, and they're hiring you to do a particular job. So you
Yep,
have to understand what that job is, you have to understand what makes someone successful, and that's what you gotta articulate on your resume when it comes to your own background and experience, which is I mean, that's
exactly.
I think by the way, I think that's hard for a lot of people to do. Probably the biggest mistake I see on resumes is, like, tasks, responsibilities. It's like, no,
And
accomplishments and
bragging,
impact.
it's not it's very anti-cultural to brag in the federal government, almost countercultural.
Interesting.
So everything is we, us, team.
Mhm.
Everything, like, it's drilled into you. So to tell them to say I'm reviewing people's resumes who I know all the time, and they're like I'm like, "Just say I," and they go, "But Erin, you know so and so also helped." I'm like, "Stop. It's your resume. Brag." And then I show them mine, and I'm like, "You know that I did not do any of this alone, you
Yeah.
know, but I mean, these are the things I led, and I'll say led. You can say led. That's not a lie. It is okay to
I
be a leader." And
collaborated on the team. No, you led the team.
but they're like, "But Erin, no, 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 please don't but Erin. Erin's not gonna be the one reviewing your resume. Someone who doesn't know you is, and so put your shoulders back and be proud of the things." I think most people that are transitioning should be proud of what they've done, and it's okay to be proud. I think maybe that's my biggest takeaway. Be proud.
What are some of the wrong assumptions you think that private leaders, private companies make about government employees?
Oh, that they're lazy.
I know I've heard, like, a couple times, this is maybe for, like, higher ed, which is obviously different to government, but it's kind of a similar transition, right? Like, if you go into higher ed into private in a private role, I know I've heard, like, it's the pace of work. Like, I think somebody taken they make that assumption, but that's probably it seems like it kind of a maybe
I
it's
don't
right for
know,
higher
and I
ed,
also
but
can't
maybe wrong for government.
yeah, I cannot speak for all the federal government. I worked in counterterrorism. The pace is not
Yeah, that pace is probably insane.
I would say that's faster. My job is not as fast paced as that. I don't think my current job is easy. So I can't speak for all of government because I come from a weird place focusing on counterterrorism most of my career. And I would say, yes, people are bureaucratic. So I think people think like every government person is like super process oriented and will never be able to break things. And I want to tell you that like most federal employees hate the red tape. They're really good at getting around it. So like if you
Mm,
want someone that will
get stuff done.
get stuff done because they've spent their whole career trying to figure out how to maneuver within these really weird boundaries. You come in the private sector and you can just do something. Oh my gosh. It's been very
Well,
exciting
some
in
of the
my career.
private sector you could do
Some of the
stuff.
private sector.
Yeah, you go to Amazon, you're not getting anything done ever for, like,
Yeah, okay, no.
years.
But I found it really like exuberating. Like I'm
Yeah,
at
that's
work and I could just do something without asking 20 people's permission.
It's awesome.
It was awesome.
That is really cool. Here's something I've been wondering too. It's kind of going back to this whole like AI tech conversation. I just had a head of talent at Calendly on the show, and I asked him the same question because I was just curious. Do you think tech is still a good place to be? Like, if you're advising someone at entry level, are you saying right now, like, yeah, tech is should be the place you look? Or are you going, maybe you should consider other things? Like, what's your thought on like the future outlook of like tech industry?
That's such a good question because I don't have the best answer. I think we've lived through layoffs at Civis. It used to be like this dream that tech was where people went to try new things and super exciting. And not that there was like job security, but like it's where all like, if you work hard, you could make it, because all the really smart people go there.
Yeah.
Like even still in federal government, a lot of my friends and former colleagues are like, oh, I want to work in tech. To them,
I've
I'm
been
like,
look on TikTok. Everybody still there is, like, I don't know what, I think it's just those day in the life videos that they put out of, like, "Now I hit the elevator, now I go drink my first coffee, now I'm gonna go hang
and
out
I
on my
just I
desk,"
think it's
and
yeah, I think it can still be a great place for innovation. I mean,
yeah,
there's still some great things, but the idea that you can have a whole career in one company, I think with all the it's just been a weird last 2 or 3 years, but it's not as stable. Not that I think it was ever stable is the wrong word here, but it's a risk. You're taking a risk, and you just need to acknowledge that. So if you're looking for stability, not it. If you are looking for a place that people are challenging and moving faster than other sectors, if that's like your gig, then yeah, I really appreciate the innovation all the time. I'm still learning all the time, which I don't think you can say that in every industry.
yeah.
That said, like, I think people should move industries more often. It's been awesome moving from government to tech. I would someday like to do healthcare or architecture or just to learn something else, especially if you're in a role that's in a support role. I think being open to different sectors could make for a really fascinating career.
The reason I asked that too is I know I've been seeing a lot more around, like, Gen Z, for example, wanting to go into trades. Like, the trades seem to be coming back, which I think is, it kind of makes sense. I think it's everyone's like, oh, AI is not going to affect trades, which, I think is a little bit short sighted. There's probably going to be some sort of like robot that can do some stuff at some point. I'm sure people are working on that, but I think there's just been that glamorization of tech for a really, really long time. So it's interesting to even see that kind of shifting. But yeah, I had a talent Calendly kind of saying the same thing and just said, like, where there's innovation, you're in an industry that's constantly going to be innovating and changing. And if that's what you're into, if that's what you're looking to get into, I just think it's the glamorization of anything, which is never good. And especially when it comes to work, it's like you should want a job because of the work that you're doing and you enjoy the work versus having like perks, this perk kind of thing of like, oh, I'm just going to work.
Why do we
I,
have sleep pods and ping pong tables? So that you never leave work. This
and
is
that
not glamorous.
Yeah, and then forever, for the last couple of years, it's been like remote work, right? And even that, it's starting to fizzle out in terms of not just the return to office, and obviously more companies are wanting people back at the office. I think we're hearing more about loneliness and not being around people and a lot of early careers saying, hey, I'm just not getting the support and mentorship that I kind of need at this
And
point.
junior people should recognize that, like, remote work. I work remotely. Do I miss people? Yeah, I work in HR.
Exactly.
But when you're a junior person, you overhear a lot of learning, and so sorry, this is just, like, the talent management part of me that's like, "For career development reasons, it would be cool
True
to have
though.
hybrid," but you need to learn so that you can have a career, otherwise you're gonna get stuck in a closet by yourself at home.
It's not even learning a job. I think it's learning people, right? It's like learning people in a professional environment because it's just fundamentally different than other interactions. I actually think that there's just been a period of time where a lot of people who are in just development, like younger people who are learning interactions, there's a huge part that's just been missed with text messages and DMs. It's just, there's more of that culture anyway. And it's like once you get into work, it's a different environment. And unless you're in it and you're understanding, okay, this is how I interact with a manager, this is how I interact with a leader, this is what an executive feels like, this is what this person, it isn't hanging out with your friend group where everyone's kind of similar. This works. There's lots of different people. It's very hard to get that same interaction and learning digitally, it's something you need to learn to even get promoted. Like you have to learn the people politic, whatever you want to call it, corporate politics, people. You have to learn that if you want to progress because it's like a fundamental thing. So it's not just like the hey, I need help with this task. It's learning the people. And it's something which I think is just underrated. And I talk
Well,
about a
getting that
lot in
mentorship.
my yeah, mentorship's another it's so hard to mentor someone or teach people digitally. And then there's the other piece of it too, where it's like I think people literally think remote work just become this idea of like remote work is just lazing around and not doing anything. And I'm like, it's not what it is. Like you're doing way more work remotely,
I would
harder
argue I
work.
worked way more remotely than the amount of people that would stop by to just a question. Probably 20% of my day was wasted by people stopping by.
I
No one
know.
can stop by remotely, so I get 20% of my day back, but I also lose 20% of my human interaction. I just think about, like, my best mentor when I was a saucy younger staffer. There was one woman on the leadership team, that was it, and I
Wow.
asked her if I could learn when she spoke, everyone was quiet in the
Mm.
room, and I just stopped her in the hallway one day and said, "I know you don't know me, but I wanna learn to talk like you." And for 2 years, once a month, I would bring my issue and tell her what I wanted to say, and then we would practice, like, a more politically savvy way of
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
it, and I
I
would
was gonna
never
say
have done that
polished,
remotely.
but that's not probably
No.
a good term. Polished,
It was a
refined.
very yeah, it was a polish. They would call it seasoning. I hated that term. They called it
Uh,
because they meant, like, leaders all had gray hair, so seasoning was
yeah.
get it?
I was just thinking like cooking, but that's all good.
But, yeah, I would never have gotten that remotely, ever. You won't see someone and how they every way, the way she sat, the way she would even do, like, this type of thing, like, oh, it was fabulous. But you're only gonna learn that in person.
It's interesting with I mean, I that whole debate by the way, I'm a huge proponent of remote work for myself,
You run
but
Dr. Phil.
that's for me, you know, it's like and I understand that it's just a lot of nuance with that, and I think it's knowing yourself. I think for companies, it's just understanding that you've gotta figure out with your employees, like, how are they getting the best work done. But there's nothing more I hate than this idea that tech is this like super glamorous industry where all the dreams come true and remote work is just people in pajamas having the best days of their life. That's the side of social media that really, really irritates me. Almost as much as career coaches saying there's a ATS robot that you can get bypassed. And now we end up with all these really crappy resumes and cover letters and all this other stuff. So,
You just
well,
have to
look,
do what's
I,
best for you. That's all.
exactly. And sometimes it's also too like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Like I know recently I've been doing a lot of networking and I'm definitely like a people person. I would call myself a people person. Once I'm in the zone with people, I'm great. But networking, putting yourself out there is just like it's so uncomfortable. And after the pandemic, it's like 2 years without really any interaction. I felt like for me, and it was like coming back into that just be nervous. I'd be, like, anxious about getting with people, but once I started getting used to putting myself out of the comfort zone, it's been great, and I encourage people to do that even though it's so uncomfortable and, like, even for job seekers, for anyone who's looking to just build out that network, it's just so important.
It's so hard for
Um
me. Like, I am a communicative introvert. I can talk your ear off once I've met you,
Mm,
but I am terrified of saying hi.
yeah,
But just doing it or saying yes to opportunities and trying to get better. One message I get nervous posting to LinkedIn. I'm not a content creator, but I post and I get terrified almost every single time. I read it like 3 times and then I just sort of hit post. But
I'm
people
walking away.
react and say thank you for some of the things that I've shared, especially for like the federal. I'm trying to help my federal friends a lot. By just trying it and doing it, we'll learn what there's times when I think I'm being my smartest self. I'm sharing the good stuff and like no one likes it. And then my most viral post was me venting. So like, cool.
That's how it goes. Gotta love social media for that. Spend 20 hours putting together one post, 0 likes. Say what you saw in the morning on the way to work that was hilarious, viral. Yeah, a
A
million
million
likes.
on Erin got frustrated at size 6 font. Okay.
Well, look, I know we're at time here, so, just a ton of value here. Where can people connect with you? Where can people, find out more about what you're up to as well?
Just like me on LinkedIn. I'm /Erin Turnmeyer. I post mostly about this whole recruiting nonsense and how to be heard above the noise, or if you're a federal transitioning employee, I am here to help as well.
I love that.
Send me a chat.
Well, guys, I always say we'll have Erin's profile in the show notes here as well, in the post that I post on LinkedIn as well. We'll tag Erin. If you're going to connect, just be patient. Erin's not hanging out on LinkedIn all day like me. Let her know that you heard her on the show. If you've got other questions as well, you can get a hold of me at www.therealistrecruiter.com. We'll be back next week with another great guest as well. So remember to go to iTunes, Spotify. If you want, leave a review as well. That's really helpful. And then if you're interested in being a guest, if you're interested in sponsoring as well, just reach out to me directly. But Erin, thank you so much. This was our first conversation, so I'm glad we got to record right off the bat. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk soon.